Is this my good side then?
No,
I think so.
No.
It's one of them. You're good.
You can see all four of my chins. Anyway, welcome Facebook Livers. This is Steve Barrett, Editor-in-Chief of PRWeek. We're about to record our weekly podcast with our special guest, Pete Marino from MillerCoors. Hey Pete, how are you doing?
Tip of the cap, I'm doing well, thanks.
Yeah.
How are you?
The man with several jobs now. Congratulations on your promotion. We'll talk a little bit about that. But he's president of 10th and Blake and also head of communications and public affairs. So we'll find out what that means in practice. And Frank Washkuch's here. Look at how brown and bronzed Frank is, back from Barbados.
Yeah.
Facebook Livers. I hope you're not jealous, but that's you look so chilled out, Frank.
Thrilled to be back.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about how long it'll take for your newly relaxed state and chilled out Frank,
yeah.
you know, to go away. I'm doing my best to make it happen now, in fact. But welcome back.
I think the business shirt on top and Speedo on the bottom is a good look too. Nice job. Just easing back from vacation.
If only I could pull that off.
So yeah, we're going to talk to Pete. We'll talk about big stories this week, restructuring at H&K, and a bunch of other things that I will explore in more detail when we actually start the podcast recording, which Perry, the web genius behind the dials, who you can't see but is there, believe me, will give me the nod. Not giving me confidence there, Perry, but
It's all over.
No, this small malfunction.
hello and welcome to the PR Week, PRWeek's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of PR and communications. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of PRWeek. Going to guide you gently through the next 25, maybe 30 minutes of our fantastic podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in if you're watching live on Facebook. What have we got for you this week? We've got Pete Marino, Head of Communications and Public Affairs at MillerCoors. But now, Pete, also President of 10th and Blake. So congratulations on that promotion and welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here, Pete. We'll find out all about that in a minute. And Frank Washkuch's here. Frank, all the way back from Barbados.
That's right, I made
First day back in the office. You people on podcast can't quite get the full glory of Frank's holiday tan. Looking chilled and relaxed and ready to go. We're doing our best to snap him back into work mode, and we'll get Frank's take. How was it, Frank?
Oh, it was terrific. Beautiful place, great island.
You look very chilled out and relaxed.
Friendly people.
Yeah, no, I've never been, but I'd love to go. Did you sing the song?
Which song?
I'm going to Barbados.
No.
I sent you it before you went.
No,
you tried to tell me you didn't listen to it.
No, I didn't listen to it. I'm
I'm a
sorry.
little
Come on,
bit-
Frank.
I'm a little bit disappointed.
It sounds like you know it though.
I'm not going to sing it. No, I know that's where you were going with that, but just look it up on YouTube.
Just one bar?
Typically tropical. Whoa! I'm going to Barbados. Still little. Yeah, there you go, listeners. You get 3 for the price of 1 on this podcast.
There you go.
You tried to tell me you didn't hear that while you were there.
Can't say I did.
Oh, wow. What's going on with the world?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sorry about that.
let's snap into some PR chat, shall we? We're going to talk about a restructure and some very senior departures over at Hill & Knowlton Strategies as Alex Jutkovich, the new US CEO, makes his mark over there and puts a new single P&L structure in place. The distracted boyfriend meme. We'll find out all about that. We'll find out if Frank was a distracted boyfriend in the Barbados and see what he's got to say about it all. The Army, they are looking sharp, putting a big new RFP together for all their marketing services, and we'll talk about the implications of that for the incumbents and those who might be bidding for the business. And terrible images from Houston all week. We'll work out what brands can do to help, and certainly MillerCoors has been doing its bit, and Pete can tell us about that. But terrible images there, and our thoughts go out to everyone who's affected by that. And anything else that catches our eye. But let's start with you, Pete. So you've been at MillerCoors for 5 years now, because we first knew you in the agency field, of course, over at Dig, and then at Olsen when Olsen acquired Dig. Great agencies, and Olsen's still a supplier of yours over at MillerCoors. But it's been an interesting time for the company, hasn't it? Because you've had this sort of merger, MillerCoors and Molson Coors, and now you've just taken on this new role. So tell us about the new role, and also about how the evolution has been and going in-house.
Sure, I joined MillerCoors 5 years ago last week.
Congratulations.
Yep, and I came directly from Olson after I sold Dig to Olson at the end of 2010, stayed on till August of 2012, and then joined MillerCoors. And I originally, to be honest with you, I joined as VP of Communications, and I thought I was going to be there for 2 years. I was going to play out my non-compete, and I had every plan and ambition to go start another agency. I'm still here 5 years later, obviously. I went from VP of Communications to Chief Communications Officer a couple years ago, and then, most recently, as you mentioned, became president of 10th and Blake, which I officially start that job tomorrow.
Okay.
So it's going to be an interesting opportunity for me to get some commercial experience. 10th and Blake was set up about 7 years ago to oversee the craft and import portfolio that we have. It's where a lot of the growth, or pretty much all the growth in the beer business, is occurring at the moment. So it's very exciting. We've made 4 purchases of craft partners around the country over the course of the past 18 months, starting with St. Archer in San Diego, Hop Valley in Eugene, Oregon, Revolver in Granbury, Texas, and then Terrapin in Athens, Georgia. And we have a couple great high-end import brands, namely Peroni, Pilsner Urquell, and Grolsch. So it's exciting. It's going to be an interesting challenge for me. I've been talking to my boss, the CEO of MillerCoors, about doing more for the better part of the last 6 or 9 months. The gentleman who I am succeeding in that job has chosen to retire after 36 years in the beer business. He's done a great job of kind of making and integrating those 4 craft companies that I just mentioned. And now it's going to be up to me and my team to see if we can't scale those things up and continue to grow them at a faster pace.
It's an interesting space, isn't it? I remember the first time I visited the States, in the 80s, when really there wasn't much choice at all, and you were really confined to 4 or 5 basic brands. And let's just say, as an Englishman, I wasn't always enamored by what they were. But the craft beer movement, I guess, was just starting up. But now you can probably get more beers in the States than possibly anywhere in the world, including the UK. So what's driven that? Is that consumer demand, or was it a cottage industry that kind of really just captured people's imagination?
In 1978, there were less than 50 breweries in this country. Today, there are over 5,000, anywhere from 5,000 to 5,500, depending on they're still opening up at a rapid clip. And I think what you've seen over the course of there was a burgeoning of craft beers in the 90s, led by brands like Pete's Wicked Ale, Sam Adams, and others. Then it kind of receded a little bit, and then about 10 years ago it exploded, and we've been in the midst of a great renaissance and explosion ever since. The why, I believe, is because you have millennials and the generation coming behind them that are used to tremendous amount of choice and fragmentation across all of their food and beverage options, and almost across anything else that they're coming in contact with. So you have people who have grown up, when our generation grew up, or our parents' generation grew up, the choices in food were also pretty limited.
Sure, yeah, that's a good point.
And now you have, Thai food, Mexican food, Vietnamese food, Korean food, and so on and so forth. And these flavors that have exploded that people have been used to have changed palates in a way that I think palates are more demanding on different styles and different flavor choices. And so certainly in beer you've seen that. Obviously in wine or in spirits you've seen that with mixology and the broad repertoire that spirits occasions can go after, and flavors of various intensity from spicy to sweet. And so because of that, we're in the midst of tremendous upheaval across food and beverage. And certainly beer has been, at the forefront of that. To your point, when you first got here, I mean, there are literally, there's no shortage of options in the beer category, whether you're talking about styles and sub-styles and the amount of flavors and the amount of broadening out of what beer can be has just changed tremendously over the last 15 years.
Belgian beer is just enormous, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just as one particular part of that. How does that change? I mean, is it better for the beer companies to have a few brands that they sell at scale? Or because this must make it a lot more complicated from the distribution point of view if you've got lots of smaller brands, and selling smaller quantities. How's that changed the business and the way you sort of market and communicate about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It absolutely has been a tremendous challenge for scale brewers to, we've been disrupted over the course of the past 10 years. Our breweries have been built primarily for long runs of big brands.
Yeah.
Distributors, have gone from a couple hundred SKUs in their warehouse to, over 1,000. The average distributor carries, I think, 1,100 different SKUs from probably 30 to 40 different suppliers, where, to your point, 10, 20 years ago, they probably had 150 SKUs from probably 3 suppliers. So the complexity is something that throughout the value chain, everybody has had to get behind. When you were a small brewer coming into this world and disrupting, you have an advantage because you are building your brewery not to be at scale. What is now happening is the reason you've seen a lot of collapsing of small brewers into big brewers, or joining up forces from a joint venture standpoint of small brewer to small brewer, is as small brewers have expanded, they're growing out of their current facilities. They're now faced with situations where they have to submit or they have to force themselves to say, do I want to spend $50 to $100 million in building another brewery, or should I partner up with somebody and reduce my risk? So that's happening right now from within craft brewing, and the big brewers, I think, have started to. We just put $50 million into a brewery in Milwaukee called our 10th Street facility, which is all about being able to do shorter runs and more variety at more scale, because retrofitting big breweries to go do that is very complex.
Go on, Frank. Sorry.
I was going to say, what is the difference between how you market some of these craft brands and how you market a massive at-scale brand?
Yeah. So St. Archer, for example, is a brand. It's a relatively young brand. It was started by a guy named Josh Landon. Josh was a action filmmaker. He had all these buddies in San Diego, like Mikey Taylor is one. These guys are skateboarders, they're surfers, they're influencers, and they were all kind of in these action sports world. Josh created an unbelievable brand. If you look at the iconography of St. Archer, it's just cool. They made brands that are approachable, and he built it with no advertising. He did it because it was a brand for him and his buddies, that when they'd go surfing together, they'd be able to bring a 6-pack of cans. They were using cans early on in the craft space. Now cans are really kind of exploding throughout craft. And he did it through word of mouth, through unbelievable filmmaking with digital films, and he had some star power because these were his buddies and they were investors into the brewery. That's one example. Hop Valley, another newer brand. These guys created beers in the Pacific Northwest. Portland and Oregon is one of the very concentrated areas for craft beers. And these guys would they had 2 restaurants and tap rooms, if you will, where people could go in there and experience the brand. And then they would start saying, hey, I really enjoyed that brand. Why can't I find it in my local supermarket or local bar? And you kind of grow out from there. So there's a variety of different models that have come out, but it's not a traditional model by any stretch of the imagination. I think Goose Island is just now getting on TV advertising. They were bought by Anheuser-Busch, 5 or 6 years ago. They are now at a place where they're nationally distributed, and now they're starting to dip their toe into TV advertising. But it's not a lot of traditional marketing programs. It's a lot of digital, it's a lot of social, it's a lot of word of mouth. We call it kind of developing that face, place, and story of the brewery and the founders, where you can kind of go from a core market and expand outward, as opposed to kind of showering the country with the brand right away.
Because thinking about what I drink, I like a few of the Bell's beers quite a bit. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen an ad for any of them.
No.
Yeah.
How did you find out about Bell's? Bell's is a great brand, Two-Hearted Ale. Obviously, many other varietals. They're from Michigan.
Right.
They probably haven't been in New York for that long. So how did you find out about them originally?
I think I just tried it at a bar once and started to notice it when I saw it in stores from there.
Yeah. I'll tell you, one of the things we spend a lot of time thinking about is the craft brewing renaissance has been great for so many reasons. One of them is being the proliferation of style and flavors. Another one is it got people interested in talking about beer in more interesting ways than had previously been done. But there are some downsides to that too. And so one of the things we've talked about as an industry is we do not want the beer business to become like the wine business. And what we mean by that is when you go into a wine store, it is either sold by region or by style. It's not sold by brand. My wife is a big wine drinker, and when you talk to wine drinkers, most times people say, I'm a Chardonnay drinker, or they're talking about a style. And what beer has been so powerful on for so many years is that it's about brands. Okay. And so what we're trying to do with our craft beers is to still build brands. We believe the formula for success is going to be about great beer and great brands. And we want people to say, you know, I'm a Lagunitas drinker, that's owned by Heineken now, or I'm a St. Archer drinker. And that's not to say you're not going to come in and out of that brand portfolio frequently, because you absolutely are. People are very promiscuous in their drinking habits today, more so than ever. So you might have a beer, you might have a mixed drink, and you might have a glass of wine at some point during the day or during a dinner. That's cool.
Pete, we got a question from a viewer, actually. Yeah. Caitlin Darris is a PR professional and a craft beer.
Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. The competition's watching.
Yeah.
Caitlin asks, what is the challenge of doing all that great marketing for the craft brands and the smaller brands, whilst also, you know, selling a lot of your mainstream big brands as well?
Yeah, well, we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, because we're learning a lot as we go about what makes these craft beers special, what consumers really value about them, and making sure that authenticity is not lost. You know, the best thing about it for us, and I think it's true for the Anheuser-Busch acquisitions that they've made, is almost all of the people who started these brands are still in the company. And that's terrific. You know, there's always a little bit of a backlash within the communities when we, Anheuser-Busch or Heineken, have bought a new craft company.
Sure, yeah.
I get it. You know, they don't want to see their neighborhood beer being compromised, being changed, and our position is not to change them. We want to learn, and we want to, as much as we want to spread the gospel of these companies too. So again, we're going to still sell big brands. There's no doubt about it. You know, the economics of our company and our shareholders require us to grow Miller Lite and Coors Light, Coors Banquet, Miller High Life, etc. But
let's not forget the Miller High Life, PRWeek.
Champagne of beers,
Champagne of beers,
yeah. I mean, come on. Who can forget that? And it's doing very well. Thank you very much.
And it does well at the PRWeek Awards.
God bless you.
Thank you for your support on
that. But so we need to make sure that we're growing these things and expanding them the right way. And again, our formula for success is to really develop the brand in the right way. Continue to let the brewmasters of these companies experiment with interesting new flavors, because you need to start, you know, from a nascent perspective, incubate new styles, new flavors that might over time grow to be interesting, big successes. But it's as much about us learning from them as it is from us bringing resources to them as well. Do
you employ more people now than before, or fewer? You know, is that
across the company?
Yeah, in terms of the craft beer renaissance and you know, the changing in styles and habits and tastes.
Yeah, I'm sure it's more. I mean, from our sales force, you need a lot of feet on the street out in the marketplace, because these are, you know, we have a great chain team, and the chain team goes in and works with big partners to sell brand programming in across big chains. But we also need people in market who are selling to independents and selling these, you know, very bespoke craft bars, special reasons why they need to sell this portfolio. So it's both.
We could talk about beer all day, I suspect, and I've got lots more questions, but we've only got a limited amount of time. It's interesting what you said about wine, because wine is much more popular than it used to be, so you're not just competing with other beer brands, you're competing with wine and spirits as well. How do you market responsibly? You know, we don't want to be a nation of alcoholics, do we?
No.
So how do you balance selling more goods with marketing responsibly?
Well, first of all, we're part of the Beer Institute, and so as part of the Beer Institute, which is the federal lobbying organization for beer, there's many brewers involved in the Beer Institute. It's us, Anheuser-Busch InBev, Heineken, Constellation, etc. We self-police ourselves in a marketing code, and so we cannot and will not advertise our brands unless we can measure the audience to be 75% over the age of 21. So there are laws that govern how and where we can market our brands. And so if we're on a program, we have to make sure that we're able to validate that audience is the overwhelming majority is over 21 years old, 21 years old or older. First of all, you know, we also make sure that we are talking about our line is great beer, great responsibility. We are, you know, we have spent a lot of time and energy educating our sales team, educating our distributors about the need for responsibility. It does not serve anybody in our company or any of our competitive companies anything to do to have a short-term win for selling beer to minors, because it's just, number one, it's the wrong thing to do. And the thing that's probably most surprising when people come into our companies, whether it's us, Heineken, Anheuser-Busch, Constellation, there is never talk about how you can kind of get around the system. There just isn't. We have no interest in selling our products to people under the age of 21. The good thing about the category that we're in
the States, anyway.
Well, that's my mandate, is the United States. The good thing about the category that we're in is beer enjoys a tax advantage because it is a beverage of moderation. It is very difficult. There are certainly people who abuse beer, and we want to help them not abuse beer. But the concentration of alcohol in beer is much different than the concentration of alcohol in spirits. And so there is an advantage that comes with beer, that it fills you up. You know, biologically, you have a couple beers and you're going to start feeling it.
I'm familiar with that scenario.
I have the gut to prove it too, right? So we've got a whole team and department, Anheuser-Busch has the same, of people that make sure that we are constantly advertising our products responsibly. We have internally something called the Marketing Compliance Committee. It is a cross-functional team of people that review every advertisement to make sure that it is responsible and that we are doing the right thing, and we live those values each and every day.
Got it. And finally, it's great to see a PR professional go into a role beyond communications and involved in senior level management. Two things about that. How do you balance that with doing the comms role, which you still have? And secondly, what would your advice be to PR pros who do want to, move up in a company? Because sometimes PR people that's the top. When they get to CCO, that's almost like the zenith, and they don't really go any further. So what's your take on those two things?
Well, the answer to the first question is I'm still trying to figure that out. So the balance is going to be interesting. We will hopefully develop some rhythms over the course of the next couple of months in terms of what that balance will be. I'm very fortunate to have a great team on both sides, the 10th and Blake side and my comms and public affairs and government affairs role, of people that I have a lot of trust and value in, and that they will continue to kind of do the day-to-day execution. But it's something that I can't turn my back on for sure, and I won't do that. For people who want to expand beyond communications, I am a huge supporter of that. I believe PR people are uniquely qualified for interesting roles beyond communications, but you need to understand the business. And a lot of people went into PR or communications because they were scared of math, because they were not willing to take accounting, econ, finance, etc. And the world for that world is changing, and I think people need to lean in. PR and comms people need to lean into the business, and they need to really understand the business. And if you're on the client side, go sit with your chief financial officer and ask him or her to kind of give you some tutorials about how to read a balance sheet or why certain decisions have been made, and soak that information in. Go sit with your strategy team or your M&A team and help them explain to you, what they're looking for and why, and where is the white space in the portfolio, and how do people think about that. Go sit with your marketing team. When you're inside a corporation, you have the ability to really do that. A little bit probably more challenging on the agency side, but I'm also a big believer in going and taking classes, whether you want to get an MBA or whether you want to just kind of take a few classes on the side and not necessarily maybe for a certificate. Go learn how your business works. And once you do that, I think PR people will start to accelerate into worlds beyond communications.
Yeah, because they already are the glue that holds a lot of functions together. That's good advice there. Thanks, Pete.
But it's about, look, what every company is wrestling with right now is about reputation management. It's about storytelling and kind of from a narrative perspective, how are we going to tell shareholders why we're winning? How we want to persuade consumers? These are skills that PR people innately have.
Absolutely. Frank, let's get into these stories and rattle through them. A bit of a longer interview than normal, but it was really interesting. So thanks, Pete. That was great. Let's talk about H&K. They've had a restructuring and some very senior departures. Frank, as the new US CEO, sort of puts his imprint on the firm. Tell us all about that.
That's right. So 3 of the most senior people departing Agent K are EVP Howard Opinski, Chicago GM Claire Keoneman, and Washington, D.C. GM Ellen Moran, who are all considered heavy hitters. They're among the senior staffers leaving the firm, and that is coming 3 months after Alex Judkowitz takes over as U.S. CEO. Firm is also starting to operate under a single P&L across the U.S.
Yeah, and when Alex was a guest on the podcast a couple of months ago, he did talk about that. He talked about a flatter structure, and that is obviously the first fruits of that new strategy. And they're going to operate under one P&L now, and they've reduced the number of job functions to 4 titles, which is an interesting strategy. Pete, with your agency background, Golan famously did that in Chicago, didn't they? About 5 years ago, they put people in these boxes without job titles, actually. So it's not exactly the same, but it feels like the big holding company agencies are, trying to reinvent themselves, or even suffering a little bit of an identity crisis, if we're honest. What's your take now that you're on the client side? You're using agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of disruption going on in the agency space right now. And to your point, agencies are trying to figure out what the next 10 or 15 years are going to look like. So all of the big holding companies, they have very stark realities called quarterly earnings and expectations.
Yeah.
And so it's very challenging for them to figure out how to morph their business in an unknown world when you have that dynamic. From a buying standpoint, having one P&L I think is very appealing. I've always been prone to small agencies, not just because I started one, but because a lot of the rationale for big agencies when they come to talk to companies like ours are the depth of services that they offer. And if you're a global company, the opportunity to tap into different offices globally. That sounds great in a pitch meeting, but the reality is when you try to do that, oftentimes it is competing P&Ls, your existing office, they're not really incentivized to let you go do that. And so it's challenging. It has been more challenging in the past than I think it needs to be. And so at least flattening out, simplifying, and going to one P&L, I think will probably be a good thing for them to do.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Frank, are you a distracted boyfriend?
No, I'm happily married. Just to be clear. I feel like I'm filling in for a millennial that should be explaining this whole thing. Because I
thought you were still just about a millennial, or is that ship sailed for you?
I think that ship is well sailed.
Gen X.
Yeah, proud Gen Xer, cynical about everything.
Yeah, well, we know that.
So, the distracted boyfriend meme, which was, it's actually a photo taken by Antonio Guillem, a photographer from Barcelona 2 years ago, but resurfaced later this month. It is a picture of 3 people, 2 people who appear to be a couple, a boyfriend and a girlfriend, if you will, and the guy is distracted by another woman walking in the other direction. I'm not quite doing it justice, but anyway, it's a meme.
You're treading very carefully between the terminology, though, and doing a good job.
I am, yes. I'm trying anyway. So there are a number of brands have jumped on this meme and been witty in how they have included their brands in this, and Tinder, Jimmy John's, Tumblr, and Penguin Random House. Not one I would have picked.
No, you wouldn't have.
Getting in on the action.
It's more Jane Eyre and sort of.
Personally, I'd believe it from Penguin, but Random House, not so much.
Getting in on the action.
So Peter's from brand. Obviously, brands want to jump in on social media, don't they? And there's great opportunities to do so. However, you can also get it wrong and make big mistakes. But you've got to act quickly as well. So how do you navigate all that? How much is it the marketing department's responsibility? How much is comms involved? Do you work together on it? And, do sometimes you have to say to the marketers, guys, have you really thought that through properly? We've seen some pretty obviously lousy attempts at doing this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is challenging today because speed matters a lot. And obviously in real-time marketing, you want to capitalize on something quickly. You want to entertain or persuade with some type of message. So the processes that are in place at big companies for review and to make sure that you're not doing something that's going to get you in hot water are at odds. There is a tension there today with what's going on. So what we've tried to do is give our agencies and marketing teams a little bit more leeway to try to take advantage of participating in those conversations when they happen. But there's risk associated with that, and so you just have to understand that you might need to embrace a failure or two and live with it. And hopefully the risk is mitigated because you've got smart agencies and smart marketing people who are going to know when to step into something the right way versus the wrong way. But there's absolutely tension going on there right now across corporations and agencies all over the country.
Yeah, and you don't, if there's a lawyer looking over your shoulder, they're rarely going to be exactly, jumping hoops.
Well, starting with the fact that I believe that photo is copyrighted, so and I'm sure these agencies and clients are not necessarily paying the copyright fee to use it.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's a wild west out there, and there are companies out there now who literally trawl the internet looking for copyright infringements. As we know, they market. Anyway,
let's talk about that.
Yeah, Frank, the Army is one of the biggest PR and marketing contracts out there.
Right, and one of the most watched too.
Yeah, indeed, and it's come up for its annual. It's every 5 years, is it reviewed? I think it's been held by McCann World Group for a long time, maybe two rounds through 10 years.
It's been held by McCann since 2005.
Okay, yeah, so more than 10 years.
Review in 2010, and they developed the Army Strong campaign in 2006.
Very successful campaign and branding, but they've had some problems. In fact, they've been disqualified from the RFP. So talk us through what's happening.
That's right, and they have filed a protest protesting that dismissal. So the latest part of this is that McCann has been given an extension of an additional 12 months dating to September 28th, 2018, worth a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
It's a huge campaign. And it's one of several extensions the Army has made to the contract over the past 2 years. So a bit of a delay over the past 2 years with this. So Weber Shandwick, of course, is the PR firm that works with McCann on this. They're both under the Interpublic Group umbrella. Look, this is a highly watched contract. McCann said to be eliminated from contention, filed a protest. That protest is still open at this point. And we should note that the Army has said that the extension doesn't have anything to do with the protest or the review. They're just extending the work for another 12 months.
Yeah, these things take a long time to go through, but it's the unconfirmed reports that the two holding companies involved in remaining in the RFP are Omnicom and WPP. And some people are actually saying WPP are the favourites to win it, which is interesting because if you've got an iconic account like the Army, are you going to really give and I'm just throwing this out there, everyone who works at WPP, I've got no skin in any game, but would you give it to a company that's it's not an American company at the end of the day? It's headquartered, launched out of London.
Or let me throw a caveat out there. What if everybody working on the account is based in the US? Would it matter?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's not like they've got thousands of employees in the US and thousands of US companies, but these are sensitive issues these days, aren't they? And especially with an iconic campaign like that, which just makes it such an interesting story. Pete, I don't know if you've got a view on this.
I mean, I think you guys are dancing all over an interesting topic. Certainly with this administration, which has been very pro-American jobs, it's interesting to think about whether that would be an issue or not. I really don't have a perspective on it personally, but it certainly is. You can imagine if President Trump were to become aware of it, I would imagine he probably would tweet about it, or he'd probably say, "Hey, this is not necessarily what my campaign has been built on, but does it matter or not? I don't know."
Although all the jobs are going to be based in the US, aren't they? And all the work is. So it's an interesting one, and we're in a global business environment now. So Anheuser-Busch is owned by the Belgians. So it just throws up a number of issues, and not least to the fact of McCann kind of appealing the decision to leave them out. So
I think the point is that, to your point, there's so many interconnections today that oftentimes these issues are just not, there's not a simple answer. It's oftentimes very complex, and some people seem to make bigger deals out of things that, if they matter or not, I don't know, but there's a lot of interconnectivity out there.
Definitely a story to watch, and we will continue to do so. Let's end with the sad events in Houston this week and surrounding areas. The horrendous floods. I mean, literally once in a 700-year floods, according to some reports. We've all followed that story, and we all, our thoughts go out to everyone involved in that. But Pete, from your point of view, and PRWeek's point of view, it's brands getting involved. What can brands do to help and definitely not be seen to be trying to exploit a situation. Business can help here, and you guys have been doing some things. You want to tell us a bit about that, but also just generally the brand's responsibility, if you like, to take on some of the burden here.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely devastating what's going on down there. We've got a big business down there with distributor partners, number of employees whose homes have been completely devastated. It's crazy the impact that this is making. But of course we want to help out. We've sent, I think we're up to 300,000 cans of water that we've sent down there, drinking water that is desperately needed. We have a brewery in Granbury, Texas, Revolver, that we announced yesterday is creating a beer just for this hurricane relief effort, with 100% of the proceeds going to the hurricane relief effort. The 100% was very important to us because we did not want to be seen as exploiting something. So we're going to create a beer, and all the proceeds are going to go to Hurricane Harvey relief. But most of the time, brands really do want to help. I had a call from somebody in my company yesterday, said, hey, how come we haven't gotten as much attention about our water donations and some of the things we're doing? I said, number one, we're not doing it because we're looking for attention. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. There are people in need. We have an ability to help out with drinking water that is, completely purified as a result of the brewing process. And so we're doing it because we're leading with our heart. We're not leading with trying to seek publicity for it. If we get publicity out of it, well, great. But that's not why we're doing it. And I think consumers can smell when brands are doing it for insincere reasons and when brands are doing it for sincere reasons. And luckily, I think there's so much goodwill that's going on. And one of the silver linings to this tragedy for me is that it's actually bringing people to galvanize around an issue where people can help. And there's been too many things here recently across this country where people are trying to rip each other apart over issues. And if we can be unified around helping our brothers and sisters in Houston that need the help, well, that's a beautiful thing, and I believe many, many brands are doing it for the right reason.
Absolutely. Well said. Just on that topic, I mean, we've the whole topic of business and getting involved in social issues has clearly been top of the agenda in the last 6 to 9 months, and a lot of CEOs withdrew from those presidential councils after Charlottesville. What's your take on that? Because business has got to be seen to be doing the right thing, and young people especially want their employers and people they're going to go to work for to make statements like this, but not all employees have the same views. So if you're a global, a national employer with people who work for you all over the country, you're going to have all sorts of political views. How do you balance those two things? What is the right thing? How much should business get involved?
Look, this is my personal viewpoint, not the company viewpoint. I would much rather be at the table helping to shape discussions and dialogues than not be there. And so if you may agree with the president, you might not agree with the president, there's always going to be disagreements in this country. And having reasonable discussions around disagreements is where we all need to get to. And I would rather be at the table having those discussions than not. And in cases where people have gone a bridge too far and said some things that are either abhorrent or totally regrettable, do you need to take a stand from time to time? Of course. But for me, we're not going to get to a better place as a country unless we can lean into disagreements and have rational, good discussions about things. And you're ultimately, in many cases, going to agree to disagree, but maybe in the course of that disagreement, you've gotten it to a better place. And the thing that scares me as a voting citizen today is it is black or white. It's becoming more at the extremes, and we need to get to a place where we can be comfortable disagreeing and having a dialogue with each other to get to ultimately, over time, incrementally, going to be the best thing for the country. Yeah,
I think that's a good point. That ability to agree to disagree and have a debate without ending up hating each other.
Right.
And social media has kind of exacerbated this. Some great things about social media, but it just, every single discussion or conversation there seems to just boil down, doesn't it, to entrenched and far opposed views. And
the binary situation is not awesome or asshole.
Yeah.
It can't be that way. So
and politics as well. That used to be, there's that middle area where both sides, both parties would work together to get things done for the country, and that seems to have dissipated as well, and we do have to get back to that.
And this is going to be an interesting topic to watch, and because I got an alert when we were coming in here that Trump is expected to reverse DACA, and that's probably going to elicit a response from the tech companies, especially very quickly.
DACA, Frank, for the uninitiated.
Essentially, it would
children born.
Right. It would remove children born illegally in this country who have grown up here and have become, contributing citizens or non-citizens, but members of society from the country. So essentially, would remove a protection for them. And that's something that tech companies and a lot of other companies, the CEOs, have been opposed to that decision.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
I say, if you disagree with somebody, why don't you invite them to talk about their perspective? Make sure you're clear on what your perspective is, and if you disagree, great, and do it over a beer. It's something that hopefully Ration can win out, and we can start being less divided as a country and less so much on the extremes.
Which actually was I hate to mention Heineken, but you work with them closely. That was the premise of their Worlds Apart campaign, which I thought was a really nice piece of work, actually.
You don't have to be sorry about mentioning Heineken. They're good friends of ours, It's the beer industry is very competitive, but one of the reasons why I love about it is it's very collegial as well.
Indeed. Some analysts are commenting on the friendliness between the two companies. But anyway, that's a topic for another podcast. Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. Thanks for your insights, and good luck in the new role, starting after Labor Day, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Frank, welcome back from Barbados.
Thank you. Thank you.
And appreciate it, Steve. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And just before we go, please do put the PR Week conference on your calendar. It's the 12th of October in New York City. It's one of the best lineups I think we've ever put together. Really fascinating mix of marketers, influencers, HR people, communicators, a really interactive show, lots of networking, lots of opportunities to meet people and be inspired. And our PR Week Awards, they are open for entries. And we want to see your best work. So you've got, I think, until October the 2nd. Oh, yeah, October the 2nd is the first deadline for entries. And if you do make it to the awards next March, Matt, perhaps you'll be in the raffle to get some Miller High Life beer, which is always a highlight of the PR Week Awards night. So thank you to MillerCoors for that, and thanks, Pete. But that's all we got time for. A little bit longer than usual, but I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time on the PR Week.